take audience seats to start with. There's going to be one slide shown to everybody. Yeah.
If we get used to this, I mean that's the what fourth. So, hello everyone, welcome to the Concrete Future Pavilion. Again, I mean that's 6th of December. Tomorrow we have a day off. That's the good news, right? Everybody did. So today the theme of the session, and we close this series of 4 sessions. I do that as well, or I introduce the session? Yeah, okay. I steal your slide. Today we talk about raising the ambition and about the carbon management challenge. So you all know that cement is CCUS is very important for cement. I mean, in our roadmap, it's about 36% of the measures. As I always say, it's not a question of how much 36, 37. The real issue is that it is a fundamental development, and we will not do it. We will not do the 1.5 without 1.5. We were very satisfied to see that in this COP, the carbon capture got tremendous momentum. I remember 2 years ago in Glasgow, it was hydrogen, and everybody was talking about hydrogen, and people used the word catapult, hydrogen, on the discussion on the climate change. I hope this year we have catapult CCUS on the space and that's a collective effort. So I really thank you guys. Same CCUS, I thank you also the GCCA, Global CCS Institute, much easier to say it like that, for the partnership and for the work that we are doing together, because I think that's really a good example of cooperation that leads to concrete on tangible results. So thank you very much, guys. So CCUS for cement, the exercise that we did with the Mission Possible partnership showed that we need 4 giga-tonne of CO2 capture by 2050 in the 7 big industries, the 7 heavy emitting industries, and transport. The free transport, including the free transport maritime, etc. Out of this, 20% is for cement. And more important, it is the deployment of this initiative. What we have seen, they have calculated the need for deployment on the 4 essential technologies, green technologies. And when you see that others have a deployment of 10 times, 15 times, the CCUS deployment need is 100 times, right? So we see the effort that we need to do, and that's the effort that we are doing now. And this effort is only possible if we have actually a policy system, and if we reform the policy system, and if we put in place, as simple as that, because very often there is nothing. So that's the session of the day, and I welcome you to actually introduce the panelists on the system. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Thomas, and indeed, huge thanks to GCCA, the whole crowd, for this collaboration we've had during the COP, but also otherwise. We've held 4 meetings. This is the 4th one now this morning, and thanks to everybody from the, I wonder where that went, yeah, various organizations who have been in the meetings before and this morning. And I know that there's some folks also online, so hello everybody. Some folks have been maybe doing all these 4 events, so we'll have to think afterwards what type of reward we give to those who have actually sat through all of them. And indeed, the Carbon Management Challenge is, we've saved this topic to last. And we're going to have a panel in a moment, but before that, I think there's a time when we can be a little bit excited about things. And I think we can today. I mean, the Carbon Management Challenge, of course, wasn't launched yesterday. However, yesterday we saw a high-level panel which was led by the COP presidency, co-organized by a number of governments. We had folks such as really on high level to mark a point in time when this Carbon Management Challenge really is a thing. And it's here at COP, and exactly the place where such meetings should take place. And thirdly, also there were new countries around the table. We had heard about a lot of countries who had joined before, but countries like Iceland, Senegal, Mozambique, the Netherlands, Kenya were there newcomers to the circle. So that was also wonderful to see. And I think what's most important about it is that we actually, for the first time ever, have a goal for carbon management that is in line with the Paris Agreement. There's been other goals before, 20 plans by 2010 or 2020 earlier on, G7, G20 goals, things like this, but they've been peanuts compared to this one. So there's a good reason to be happy and excited today, because it's hopefully another boost for the work we have been doing and that we can continue to do at increasing speed. So this is what the Carbon Management Challenge actually is all about. I think it all fits on one slide, at least today. So participants have signed up to carry a message that carbon management, in addition to other mitigation efforts, is integral to keeping pathways that limit the warming to 1.5 degrees. It's really important, carrying a message, first of all, that we actually say it. And secondly, that we say it in context with other technologies, that nobody thinks that this is the winning card or that silver bullet or whatever name we might name it. It's not. It's part of the portfolio. I think it's really important to have this first piece of it, that commitment to carrying that message. Secondly, of course, it's supporting this global goal to reach gigaton scale by 2030. That might hurt, because that means that we're going to have to invest and put funds and money into this. And now, this is not something that we need to do in 2040. These are things that have to be done now, today. And that's the other second really important piece of this challenge. And of course, then third, it is that signatories aim to act in different ways, joining efforts, setting national targets, policies, incentives, and actually driving carbon management technologies forward in group of countries, a critical mass to move forward, and we all know that the club is open for every country who wants to join. So that's what the challenge is all about. And today we're going to be discussing what this means and how we actually move this forward as a collective. And to do that, we have a wonderful panel. Thank you everybody for allowing us to volunteer you for this panel. And I will invite the panel to come up. We have Rachel McCormick, Director General at Natural Resources Canada. Morning, Rachel. We have Alex Millward, who is CCUS Director at the UK Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. Representing industry, we have Claude Lauréat, who is Director, Cement Innovation ESG at GCCA, Organizing Committee. Jarad Daniels, CEO of Global CCS Institute. We have Wagner Albuquerque de Almeida, who is Director at the International Finance Corporation, IFC. And where is JF? Jean-François Gagnier, who is Head of Clean Energy Ministerial Secretariat, was just here a minute ago, and now he's not. So he will be given, he will be put on the naughty chair for arriving late when once he first comes in. But he will. We have seen him this morning already. And so might be a bit awkward. I'll stand here anyway, and we'll make it work. Yeah. Oh yeah, lean on in a casual, club style. Okay, very good, very good. So yeah, indeed. So we have in the panel representatives of governments, of industry, of financiers, and also of group that can help mobilize everybody to drive this. And so I think it's interesting and a good selection of organizations who can comment on this. And I would like to start with our government representatives, Rachel and Alex, and if you could first both, comment and outline that what are the key steps that you would plan to take to drive carbon management challenge on in your countries first, and starting with you, Rachel.
Hello?
Yeah, there we go.
Calling JF.
Yeah.
He used to be on my team, so I understand.
Yeah.
Okay. So first off, let me thank everyone for all their work in bringing this panel together. It's really an important issue, and we agree with the science-based target that was really established under the Carbon Management Challenge about the importance of early and urgent action to reach a gigaton. We understand what needs to happen by 2030 to ensure that we're staying within 1.5, and we know that carbon management is a big part of that. Taking a step back, most people here probably know that Canada has been active in the carbon management field for some time. Through public-private partnerships and good geology, we've been able to actually land at, I think, about 20%, I think your report says, of the existing projects in play across sectors too, including multi-sector collaborations with the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line, and almost 50 projects underway right now. And so I think that's really important. In September, Minister Wilkinson actually worked with Dr. Fatih Birol to launch our carbon management strategy in September. And I think that really provides an important framing in terms of the priorities to guide our approach, which are accelerating innovation, policies and regulation, attracting investment and trade opportunities, scaling up projects and infrastructure, and then building partnerships and growing inclusive workforces. So just a few things in terms of what we're concretely doing. I was the first person to be able to use that play on words, is we've recently announced a CCUS tax credit. Right. And so for those of you that are less familiar with it, one of the things I think is really effective with it, it's just been tabled, so the details are to follow, is that the amount of the tax rebate is actually higher for direct air capture, so up to 63% of expenditures that are applicable, 50% for other CCUS, and then 34.5% for transportation and other aspects. And that rate is available until 2030, and then it starts going down. And the expenditures are actually backcasted as well. So the people that are taking early action are going to get the opportunities faster than others. Right. And the more ambition they have, the better. Another thing that we have, of course, is carbon pricing across Canada. And so in our fall economic statement, we launched what's called the Canada Growth Fund, allocating up to $7 billion in carbon contracts for differences to provide space and certainty with respect to that carbon price that we have. So we're at $65 a ton now, supposed to go up $15 a year to $175.
Thank you. Over to you, Alex.
Great to be here, and I agree, sort of bringing the carbon management challenge together as a bigger collective compared to the endeavours that were going on. I mean, none of this is new. The IPCC had identified carbon capture as an essential contributor. We in the UK have got an independent committee for climate change, which has also determined that in order to hit our net zero, which is enshrined in law, which means no individual government can choose to change that. It'll need to get that through Parliament, so good luck with that. And there's real and severe consequences in the framework that underpins that. Real strong support. And the UK has sort of set out its plans and the science-based targets that we need to achieve, the 20 to 30 megatons from carbon capture by 2030, and then scaling up from there. So the sort of setting the ambitions and collectively is really helpful. Doing that together helps share. So some of the insight actually sat here together and hear that and compare that to our model. The technology works. The plans can do. The private sector is ready to stand up and do it. The only question is who pays how much, who bears what risk. I'm in the throes of a lot of detailed negotiations back home in the UK. And that all needs to be done at a cost that society and business is willing to bear. So there's a lot of detail to get done in the UK, which we'll work through. One of the things which, again, excites me about the CMC collaboration is, again, the chance to share and the chance to give. I spent a lot of time here with Indonesia, with Malaysia, with Middle East and other countries who haven't necessarily taken some of the regulatory framework that we have, and we can share some of that. Also, the UK announced sort of 1.6 billion of funding into low carbon energy schemes and climate mitigation schemes at this COP as part of an 11.6 billion sort of international support that will go into that agenda. So we learned from the COVID vaccines, no one's safe till everyone's safe. So yes, we've got to do our own sort of individual contribution, and there's a lot that the UK needs to do in that area, but we also need to go and help decarbonise the rest of the world as well, because we've got to get everybody on board for the 1.5.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. And we were joined by JF Gagne, head of SEM Secretariat, just a second ago there. So thanks JF for not disappearing but coming back. Actually, Alex, I'd like to stay with our government representatives. You started to talk about this, Alex, and I think it's really important that we have a group of countries who have signed up, many of which are, I would say, the absolute leaders in this, have developed projects, have developed policies, have strategies in place. Some are followers, and then there's a bunch of other countries who have not yet signed up. So how can you individually and how can we collectively get more countries on board, and what mechanisms might we have to help them with their CCUS carbon management endeavors? I don't know, maybe Rachel, you can go, or do you want to go?
So the UK is a follower. We're not storing any CO2. Norway's been doing it for 30 years. US has been doing it since 1972. I keep reminding people who want to say we're first movers that we're a long way behind. We've got some fantastic frameworks, but we're yet to cement and store any CO2. But we're playing catch up on that. In order to get that scale of change done, again, setting the ambition publicly and then having what you measure is what you manage, and this is a carbon management challenge. So having those measurements requires huge amount of endeavour, and so it's just much easier to sort of swim with existing channels that exist. So in the UK, I've worked very closely with our Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office, who've already got a lot of these channels into places. Countries are very keen to learn what the UK sort of overall net zero regulatory framework is, and then what carbon capture's contribution is within that. So we have a large amount of support through our ambassadorial network that helps with that, and then also our Department of Business and Trade. Capitalism is a huge, great driver of innovation. So there is, for the UK taxpayers' contribution in launching this industry, their return is jobs. A lot of that knowledge transfer will come through technology transfer through the private sector and the capability that does exist. We have a Department of Business and Trade who is there really trying to facilitate that knowledge learning through trade. So we have a very large team working with each of those countries, bringing them into the net zero agenda overall, but then also the carbon management challenge within that.
Great. What about Canada?
So I think that, like anything, I think there's different messengers, right? And so I think it's great. We have obviously the CCS Knowledge Center, which is based in Canada, but can collaborate with groups around the world in terms of supporter of both the CDR and the CCUS challenge work under with them and MI. I think those are really important programs where you're bringing people together, and I'm sure JF will talk about sort of that convening factor and the ability to share information. I think another important interlocutor and message deliverer is, of course, industry. And although it's not CCUS or CDR, I think, the fact that, for example, our Trade Commissioner Service worked with Carbon Cure, and they're able to fit up a cement plant in a day now, right? And it's their technology has been deployed to I think 600 plants in the U.S. now, deploying internationally as well. Workshops, public service announcement. We're doing a workshop on December 14th to share the information that about Canada's process, both in terms of what we're doing on technology, but also on the policy side, how we're engaging. And when I talked a little bit about our carbon management strategy at the beginning and the priorities, I think it's really important that included communities and jobs. And I think if you're trying to sell carbon capture or CDR to governments or to communities or to business, the fact that it can be shown as a vector for community confidence in industry, the fact that it can be seen as a way to build prosperity with communities and also to build community confidence in the economy, I think is a really powerful message. And so thinking about it through those lenses will help.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. And also you mentioned the small acronym CDR, and just to be clear, Carbon Management Challenge obviously includes plain vanilla CCS, CCUS, and also removals. They're all part of that Giga-tonne quest, so thanks for that. So over to industry. Claude, you represent the whole industry there today in this panel, and so you've known about the challenge obviously for a long time, but what is this for you, and how important is this, and what would you like this to achieve for you from the cement industry perspective?
Thank you, Gio. And yes, we heard about it since quite more than a few months, I think. But I think now the commitment is much bigger, and it's big. And I think more countries will join. And I hope that even as an industry, we can help to convince more countries to join. Because as Thomas said, this is an essential technology for us, and we really see a momentum here at COP for CCUS in cement. But we also see that our industry has gone a long way. And before you leave, I invite the one who haven't seen the map of CCS project in cement to look at it when you go out. But what you see on that map is that most of the projects are currently in Europe and in the US, and a few projects elsewhere. So I hope that this will help more countries to put the right regulatory and enabling policies in place. So I think one of the key pillars of this is probably knowledge sharing, but also amongst governments and regulators to put the right framework in place and help to make the business case for CCS, but also help to de-risk where the business case is not in place yet. And that includes the mapping and the matching of the storage sites and the cement plants, which is a big piece of work. We heard this in a previews of our workshop, that this is work that needs to be done. And then also help. So, for example, I mentioned this already. We have now launched with GCCA a project for CCS in India, where thanks to the foundation, we are able to do the mapping and the matching. But through this project, we will identify 2-3 sites where we want to do a pre-feed study. And there we are still desperate to find funding for the 3 pre-feed studies. So we hope that this kind of mechanism will also help to find the funds and the grants that are needed to take those projects off the ground. I also believe part of the regulatory measures that cross-border trading and credit mechanism is something essential, where we're a bit struggling, with all the Article 6 and the voluntary market, but I also hope that we can find collaboration to put that in place for carbon trading. And yes, collaboration, technology, but also regulatory. I think we have had a lot of collaboration in the sector. We're all linked. We have the GCCA collaboration with the Clean Energy Ministerial. We work very closely with GCCSI, with the CCS knowledge. They help us to develop our handbook this year. And yes, collaboration is important. And I also heard, even overnight, a lot of excitement over my members in some regions, like her LATAM colleague said, oh, wow, so maybe that will help to do something in Latin America. We have plans to work in Brazil, Jarad, as well, whenever we can. And last but not least is China. I think it's really, I mean, I was in China, I've been in China quite a few times this year, but I was at the US-China roundtable delivering a speech when the agreement was launched on this 5 project with the Sunny Island Agreement. And I really see the China cement industry also preparing to deploy, and I hope that this will help. So yes, I hope it will help to further trigger action from our members together with governments. By the way, if you want, I mean, you can already see a lot of action there on your right, but before you go, if you haven't got it, we also have our progress report where you will see what our members are doing. And I hope that this carbon management challenge will help us to see more carbon capture project in our next progress report.
Thanks, Claude. Yeah, indeed, important points. Enlarging the sphere of countries, absolutely key. Getting framework conditions right, also in these international negotiation and international organizations, institutions. And you mentioned India and Brazil in the current work. Both countries, India was host of last CEM, last G20. Brazil is the next one, so that fits really well with the with all of that sort of political momentum that can be harnessed behind this. Interestingly, I think it's also reflected in your thoughts as a side comment. A real advantage we have here is that we have a fairly close-knit community of industries, of organizations, think tanks, even finance sector, who actually know each other since a long time and who can really, make things happen. And that's a definite plus. Okay, well, actually, next one is Jarad. So Jarad, how excited are you about the challenge, and how do you see the importance, and what for you are some key success factors for this to be successful?
Well, I'm very excited to see this, and it's important, I think, that this challenge is now visible. And as we just heard from Claude, right, you had members in LATAM that were excited about this going forward. And so to me, the climate math is absolutely clear. Collectively, and we're all in this together, as Alex said, right, we need gigatons of carbon management, both point source carbon capture and storage and carbon dioxide removal, to achieve net zero and to have a pathway to keep 1.5, in play. The climate math is essentially absolutely clear on that. And I think the positive benefits that I see of the carbon management challenge, if you go at gigaton scale, consistent with Paris, consistent with all the climate math and modeling and analysis, right? It elevates that to a very senior political level in a number of countries and in a multilateral landscape. And it puts it in the appropriate role alongside everything else we need to do to help mitigate global climate change. And I think that framing as a tool in a portfolio of tools at climate relative scale is absolutely important, right? We need to do as much energy efficiency as possible, as much electrification of all aspects of society, as much renewables, wind and solar, as much nuclear in societies and countries where that is socially acceptable. And the math says we still need to do gigatons of carbon management. So I think that broader framing of the appropriate role is essential and very valuable. I think giving this the visibility and the gravitas and the convening power of all the countries that were shown earlier is wonderfully helpful. And I think the near-term target, a gigaton collectively by 2030, it's very nice to see that as a common goal. I think, it's interesting, we've already just heard, this requires all of us to work together. Governments have a role to set durable policy and to work on, non-trivial issues such as transboundary movement of CO2 in Article 6 and very, very challenging things to do, right? Not just, in this sector, but challenging things across all forms of decarbonization, right? Industry has a role to play to build, own, and operate these projects at scale. And it's not just one industry. This is going to require collaboration across all industries. And while I used to be a former government guy for 30 years, and governments do wonderful things well, they're not going to deploy this at scale. This has to be done on fair commercial terms, and it's essential that this is financeable. And so one of the key challenges is building that business model, right, in all the regions, in all the jurisdictions, in all the various markets that can make this investable to get commercial deployment that is going to allow us to scale. And I see this carbon management challenge, one of the benefits is hopefully this gives us the visibility appropriately framed at high levels across multiple governments that will attract the attention and interest and engagement of the finance community. I think that's one of the tremendous benefits and opportunities going forward to the Carbon Management Challenge. The Carbon Management Challenge, I think, is unique because it gives it that higher importance. From my view, in terms of what would be successful, again, my day job is to track all of the progress globally. Right now, there's 41 operating projects capturing about 50 million ton per annum, which is great, but we need to get to Giga-tonne. There's over 300, almost 400 projects in the pipeline spurred by government policy. And not one size fits all. Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law in the States, other policy tools in the UK. These projects, they add up to like 0.3, 0.4 gigaton. So I think from my view, the Carbon Management Challenge, all the countries involved, the 20 plus and growing, absolutely need to work to the gigaton. The opportunity and the Carbon Management Challenge affords is how do we collectively, and I would argue it's perhaps a government role, right, resource working with multilateral development banks to help is the challenge going forward collectively at a high level. How are the members successful, right, engage and resource and support and work together to speed deployment in the rest of the world where all the math says we're going to need to deploy this as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Jarad. That's, excellent points there. We're coming to finance next, but you mentioned some figures there, and I think it's interesting to just note that we are at this COP tripling renewables, or over 120 countries have signed up for that, which is brilliant. That's really important, tripling renewables to 11 terawatts. We have yesterday, again, come together on a quest to multiply carbon management by 40. Okay, it starts from a lower base, obviously we know that, but that is a big task. So just putting that in people's minds as well. Indeed, Wagner, you come from the International Finance Corporation, and we're going to need a lot of financing for to multiply carbon management by 40 in the next 7 years. And not everything can be done by International Finance Corporation, we know that. But I think you have an interesting, vital role to play in catalyzing funding from private sources and especially towards emerging economies. So what do you think your role could be in helping carbon management challenge to be achieved, and what thoughts do you have of its importance?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, so I do always something, okay? I prepare some talking points, and I never use. So I don't know why, I change again, okay? So I have plenty here. I have at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I change completely the script, okay? So that's something that always help, okay?
Very good. So
a second thing, what I'm responsible for very interesting sectors that I ask you guys if there is something connection. What agri, forestry, and manufacturing have similar to them? So what is a connection? So what food has to do with steel? What forestry has to do with cement? What is interesting is that during this COP, in all panels that I join, the issue is decarbonization. It's not only about hard to abate, or let's say what's the name that we said it's not hard to abate, it's difficult to abate or something like that. So carbon intensity. The same thing happens in agri. The same thing, forestry also has a play here. So it's everything today about this COP is about carbon intensity reduction. And this has many different implications, including to food security, the end result. That's quite interesting. So there is a lot of connection. And then here, my first thing. I think to solve the issue, we need to work together. The governments, the associations, the development of institutions, the banks, the insurance, the communities, the universities. It's a very broad agenda. Okay, we are doing carbon credit for many, many years, but the issue is still affordability, particularly for the markets that I work. And what I'm not working with US, I'm not working with Canada, I'm not working with UK. I'm working with very different places. And by the way, they are not the ones who carbonize the world, okay? It's not Africa who carbonize, okay? So it's not this, but the current situation is putting an additional cost for them that needs to be paid. The question is, who pays what? I also will say that all the conversation that we see about influential acts, benefits here, benefits there, also put questions in the developing countries. Can they compete with that? Okay, okay. But when I started to talk about C-band, when I talked about so also I'm imposing a little bit of limitations. By the way, I'm not against C-band, okay? C-band is something potentially very positive for the future. But how I bridge the short term with the medium term and the long term that we want to do is a key element. What we are thinking at IFC is we need to find a way to help, to catalyze, to demonstrate, and bring resources together. Yes, we don't have the balance sheet to solve the problem. McKinsey number, some people will say that this number maybe is not the best number, but they say that emerging markets require $340 billion by 2030 in investments. Know that in all these industries, there are few things that we can do now. I don't need to wait the full technology to be developed to track the issue. There are things that can be done now. And that's what I like the word management. I'm not limiting the discussion to only one single point. It opens a chance also to do something a little bit more basic, more simple, but can be done. But also how we can bring something, carbon capture maybe to Senegal. How can I bring carbon capture maybe to South Africa? How can I do? So that's the kind of thing that we need to do. And one of the things, because these countries, they don't have necessarily the fiscal space to do what the developing countries are doing, the developed countries are doing, I think that comes maybe the impact of blended finance, grants, to develop knowledge, to develop capacity, to de-risk the project, because the key element is, are the project bankables? At the current cost, at the current affordability, it's a little bit difficult. I cannot ask somebody from Togo to say, pay me more for the green cement, okay? They need the cement, they need the steel, and they need to grow. I cannot limit the growth. They need houses, they need bridges, they need roads, they need to develop. They need to have job creation. But we need also the help from the developed countries to support the emerging markets. And what we are trying to do, we are trying to develop maybe a program of maybe $30 billion for the next few years, trying to have different kinds of capital, trying to use different kind of blended finance. We don't know if we'll be able to put this together, to put this to work, but we need your help also to do it. Yeah. So
panels are always best when you drop your script and do it from the heart. I think the really important, absolutely vital role of multilateral finance institutions is this area where you can actually catalyze action and you can help do a lot of groundwork, capacity, knowledge building, which commercial banks will not be doing. They will fund projects when they are bankable, but in carbon management, often there's a lot of groundwork needed. Multilateral development banks can really play an interesting and very, very vital role. And excellent point on the various emerging economies. I mean, we have in the CCS space a number of them who've come forward. I mean, South Africa has been there for a long time. Indonesia has come to the fore. I was in a panel the other day where I was surprised to hear about all the carbon dioxide removal work that is being done in Kenya, and what I picked movers that we can and should really engage with. JF, sorry for having you wait for that long, but we're coming to you now.
He was a nutty one.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
My
that's the
ongoing.
naughty chair. Clean Energy Ministerial is an interesting architecture of countries, governments who come together to collaborate and to drive the clean energy agenda, decarbonization forward. So, what's your thoughts on the Carbon Management Challenge, and how can the SEM more widely, not just the CCUS initiative?
And okay, let me try to answer the two questions. And first of all, what can the SEM do aside from disturbing panels by coming late? I mean, the purpose of the SEM is to create these dialogues, right? It's to bring the people together. And as you mentioned it, we're driven by government, but over the past 15 years, we've been very good at developing a over these past few days, and in the many COPs that I've had, what is always, for me, extremely interesting is we get to sit down, we get to talk about issues, and often we get to talk about the same issues over and over and again. And what I've found, finance sector, and then coalesce as the project developers, and then coalesce as the governments. But the questions that these forum are asking answered by the right people. And as I said, I think in the past, we've been very good at bringing technology providers, users. I mean, it's great that here we're talking about CCUS in a cement industry pavilion, right? Because it's the demand for it is where we're going to use it. Yesterday, we launched major public works demand drivers in the world, so we're going to make sure that we put an infrastructure so that the industries who need to invest in technologies like the CCUS actually see the business case of doing it and can then create bankable projects. So it's about bringing all these pieces together. And as you mentioned, it's also bringing these pieces together, in terms of a holistic view. So CCUS is a key technology. Hydrogen is a key technology. Bioenergy is a key technology. Well, actually, if you think about CCUS, bioenergy, and hydrogen together, they actually can interact to create a series of other opportunities. And so it's trying to bring this systemic approach to what we're trying to do, and then identifying who is best placed, who has the most benefits in being the forerunner, and how can we get them to act first. And then, as we were discussing earlier on, then share that knowledge to the broader world to bang on. So that's also where our membership becomes very interesting, because while we also have a lot of the large emerging economies who have both also capacity, but also the regional leadership to bring. We should not underestimate the power of inspiration and pledge. So I talked about the global procurement pledge that actually is sending a strong signal that governments are walking the talk. But another similar example you can think of is about 2015, we launched what we called the EV 30 by 30 campaign, which was a goal of achieving 30% of electric vehicles by 2030. When we tried to do this, people were saying, "You're crazy. We'll never get there." But remember, then we were counting EVs in the tens of thousands worldwide. 3 or 4 years later, once government had sent this strong signal that we are serious about achieving that target, we were looking at 30 by 30, and we said maybe we should have gone 40 by 30, because we were actually going to exceed and bust that target. People wanting to make this happen, putting the right policy framework, to putting the right money together, and then having a plan to move forward. So I think this is where the power of the CCUS initiative and other SEM initiatives brings in terms of that viability. And maybe then I can just do it, because I think we're very, very good at identifying what the projects need. I think we're very, very good at finding what the end use needs. I think we're still working a lot in terms of how do we bring the right type of money to the table. And one things we've learned in these few years is each project has a very different risk profile, and each type of finance actually has a very different capacity to address the different risks. And to me, this is the next part of this, how do we bring money to the table, is which money is the right stakeholder to address what risk. We have philanthropies, we have MDBs, we have the private banking sectors, and we have multiple types of different financing mechanisms, and we need to have this dialogue with the project developers to really understand what is the most significant risk, and that varies by region. So international collaboration is also key into this. So that's where we hope to be able to take this next.
Thanks, to drive these things forward. I think good point, an excellent point. That we in the CCUS circles, we must not work in silos, but also we need to remember that we are not in a silo. We are part of an energy and decarbonization system where we have a role to play, and where there's also opportunities. You mentioned bioenergy, hydrogen, CO2, fuels. So there's opportunity spaces that can also be exploited in this area. Now, I have one question left for the whole panel, but before that, and taking the risk that somebody asks it, does anyone have a question or comment? Sir.
Hi, Matthias Gelber. I'm supposedly Italian delegation, but I'm actually German. And I live in the Philippines. And I recently did a case study of a Philippine cement company that does 700,000 tons per year. And I was amazed. Their carbon footprint per ton is 300 kilogram of CO2 equivalent. And if they would shift to renewables, I think it could go down to 150. So I like the comment that we need to combine the two things with one another. And they are the cheapest cement in the Philippines. And they actually don't sell themselves as green cement. They sell themselves as cheap cement. So I was wondering, how can we bring the two things together, the core decarbonization of the process and the formulation, and then the carbon capture as two combined things?
Maybe. Well, I mean,
You have taken the microphone.
well, I'm taking the microphone because my arm is longer to give it to you, and we all need to work together. But I think what you just mentioned is absolutely correct, right? And from my view, with an engineering background, how do we make the overall process as efficient as possible? How do we look for opportunities to do substitution? How much electrification can we drive in? And then, after that systems analysis, how much carbon management do we need to get those deep emission reduction? And I think from my perspective, and I'm going to hand the mic to Claude here, that answer is site-specific, project-specific, and varies site by site. But most of the analysis, when I take a step up and say, as a collective in the cement industry, the analysis says you need a healthy amount of carbon capture on those point sources to make that work. I don't know if you have comments in terms of the numbers to all of that, but to me, that's the thought process of absolutely how we ought to approach everything from a system perspective globally, is how do we be as efficient as possible? How do we use as much renewables as possible? And then what else do we have to do? And again, globally, it says we got to do gigatons of this, and here we are.
Thank you, Jarad. I think we are working too much together because you can answer the questions on our behalf. But CCUS is one technology, but to remind, and you have our roadmap there are other levers we are trying to push, and indeed the first one is clinker substitution by cementitious material. Now, the number you're mentioning are quite impressive, and I'm interested in knowing which company that is, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay, nice. They should join the GCCA. Yeah. And but so yes, all levers are important, and the first thing. But even they are still emitting, and this is where we will need CCS, is to get now the remaining emission down. And yeah, that's it basically.
Well, and maybe just a general comment, and then we'll turn it back to you, right? I mean, this is a great example of, carbon-intensive industries that are challenging to abate. We need to apply all forms of carbon mitigation, but some of these processes have what they call process emissions. So even if you drove, a cement plant by 100% renewables, when you take limestone and calcine that to make lime, you get 1 molecule of CO2 for every molecule of calcium oxide. And so that is the challenge where technically, these technologies are the only solution that is available at scale today, which is why we are very passionate about finding a way to work together to make this work.
Great, thank you. And that wasn't my question, so that's excellent. But excellent injection into a real world point in the middle here. So the last question is perhaps a high level question, but I think it's quite important. Those of us who follow press, and I think in the area of carbon capture, many probably do, and some see it even if you didn't want to follow that. In the lead up to COP, there's been a lot of very negative press saying that carbon management, CCUS, CCS, is a thing of the past, and it's a false solution, and it is something that we should not ever anywhere be advancing. I'm somewhat exaggerating, but you could read that into what is being written, even by mainstream press. So the question is that how do we ensure that Carbon Management Challenge is a force for good that has more supporters than skeptics out there? Maybe starting Rachel. That can be 1 point, 2 thoughts, whatever.
Thank you. I hope next year when we come together, I hope that we'll be able to. I think, as others have said, the technology is there. It's the signals to the market that are important. And I think you have to look at them in combination. The global procurement one, like Canada's now sending a signal. We're the biggest public procurer in Canada. So for buildings, all together. So CCUS is an element of that. And then the other thing I think is it's not an either or. We know it has to be both.
Right.
My general bit on that is to ask the critic, what's the alternative? Engage in the alternative, bring society along their alternative, because different people have got different views, and then show how to make that alternative view possible through the governments that they're trying to do it. Because generally that alternative means factories shutting down, tens of thousands of jobs being closed, and change of lifestyle that on the whole, so the sort of public acceptance that we do in the UK, ask the question, who wants net zero? I do. I want net zero. Are you willing to change your lifestyle to do so?
Yeah, well, to an
Are
extent.
you for the investment cost in the early stage, are you willing to pay that extra investment cost? And so I asked the critics, what's the alternative vision? Paint out the total solution and ask them to go and question the scientists that put the IPCC together, that put the pathway together, that go and question the Committee for Climate Change and the deep research that they put to the total net zero pathway, and say, what's that alternative without carbon capture? And no one can paint a better picture. And so it is part of maintaining prosperity, extending the prosperity. It is, and the UK describe it as an essential component of net zero.
Thank you. Rapid comments, everybody who wants.
I will play my joker to answer that question, and I have someone who think is ready to answer your question. And I think, Winston, you should explain that you're about to launch the first net zero.
So Winston Beck from Heidelberg Materials. I'm heading the government affairs department. So I think that's of course a very important question, right? So we need to create trust in the market for that technology and also the product. So I think there are two important steps from the industry has to do. The first one is we need to be extremely transparent and honest about the environmental benefits, right? So we need to be really have very strict and very transparent monitoring and verification requirements, and also we need to be very open about the methods we use. And then we also need to implement projects and show that it actually works. Right. So we have announced 9 major CCUS projects worldwide. And our first CCS projects, which we actually have started to look at in 2005, and we have really worked on the project since 2014, will go live at the end of next year in 2024 at our plant in Norway, in Brevik. We will capture 400,000 tons of CO2, and we will start delivering the first carbon captured net zero cement in the world as of 2025. And we have actually launched the commercialization of that product, that brand, on Tuesday this week, so just before a COP. So that is really for that type of technology and what it actually can achieve. And we will deliver it in 2 ways. We will have the physical product, which you can buy from the site, but we will also deliver the net zero cement to customers around Europe, and we will use environmental certificate to do that with blockchain technology, and the blockchain technology will make sure that we really only account the emissions we are capturing, and also that we only account really the 1 ton one time, and we will be extremely transparent about that also to our customers and any stakeholders who's interested.
Thank you, Winston. Bringing products to the market. So we do need to finish, I believe. So, but rapid answers, please.
Yeah, rapid answers. I think the climate math is clear. We need to do this. We need to find a way to do this. We just heard that technologies exist. To me, actions speak louder than word. The figure of merit is standing up projects, being transparent in the communication, and finding ways then to work together, government, industry, and the finance sector, to speed and accelerate our progress from where we are to the gigatons to where the challenge is framed. And I think the more projects we stand up, the easier that path becomes.
Right.
If I see this as a transition, I think it's valid. There's no, like, also if I switch from one model to the other one, I think it will not be inclusive enough. I think it will not be justice enough. So I think it's part of the path that we need to go. And we need to change the habits, okay? I think that's something that we need to do, okay? So otherwise, we will be faking to ourselves.
Thank you, Wagner. JF.
Yeah, thanks. I guess it's probably just a mix of everyone's. I think the issue is to turn this debate that is, if you're doing this, you're not doing the other thing. It's no, we're doing everything, and this is part of it. And again, what's the counterfactual? If you're not doing CCUS in some of these industries, then there is no low zero cement. And so that is kind of why is it important, but not. And the counter for the discussion, and we need to be fair, is no, we're not delaying discussion, we're putting actual foot on the ground. The second aspect that we also need to challenge is a lot of people is, well, this is very capital intensive. It's large numbers of money that could go elsewhere in terms of advancing the transition. You put that into perspective, and you and I were talking about this morning, you know, $4 billion demonstration project versus $3 trillion of investment in renewable, like it doesn't even show up, but that $4 billion can actually be a catalyst for a solution that has no alternative. So it's, again, showing we're trying to advance. We're not at a time where we can ignore any possibility. I think this is how John Kerry basically says it, is we can't refuse any option. We're not going to put all our eggs in the CCUS basket, you know, but we also can't ignore this technology.
Thank you, JF. I will now attempt to summarize everything. Not. Thank you, everybody in the panel, for your excellent insights. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for coming, and this concludes our 4 sessions in this space with GCCA. Thanks.